Welcome to the latest episode of the Real World Nutrition Podcast. This is episode 203, Diet Trends, Food Fear, and Why We Need to Stop Labeling Foods. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Real World Nutrition Podcast. This is episode 203. And I mention that because last week, or in the last episode 202, we talked about superfoods and clean eating. And today I want to continue that theme with two topics that often overlap and come along with the superfoods and clean eating. And that's diet trends and food fear. And these ideas shape the way people think about food and, unfortunately, often create more stress and confusion than clarity. So in this episode, I do want to first talk about some of these diet trends that I know I've seen pop up. They have a cycle like fashion tends to. There's different categories of these diet trends and how they've evolved over the years. And then I'll shift into the idea of food fear and what that looks like and why this matters. And then I do want to wrap this episode up, or at least reiterate, because I've done this before, on why labeling foods and attaching guilt to what we eat does more harm than good. All right, so first up, diet trends. These are not new. They've been around for decades, and we can actually now say over a century. And while names change, patterns do tend to be pretty familiar. So I talk about them in main categories. So these are categories that I've made up, put them together, but it makes sense. I'm sure anybody would put these categories together. So I'll start with low-carb diets. So this one, Atkins, keto, South Beach, paleo, some versions of Whole30. So these diets are all about cutting carbs. Atkins has been around since the 70s, but really made it to prominence in the mid to later 90s. And this is promising quick weight loss, blood sugar control. And as I said, these diets are about cutting carbs, and sometimes drastically, and here's the thing, replacing them with protein and fat. But this leaves a lot of people often confused about which carbs are good or bad, because fruits and all grains are carbohydrates. And sometimes people have this idea when they're on a low-carb diet, fruit is bad, grains are bad, anything in the grain group should be avoided. So that's the low-carb category. Now, what's similar but different as well, high-protein diets. So this overlaps with low-carb diets because the emphasis here is on specifically eating lots of protein. And by default, it's going to end up being lower carbohydrate. So higher protein, this could be through meat, could be through protein powders or bars. And the message here is that protein equals health. And protein is definitely essential. But the idea that more is always better is an oversimplification. Now, here's a quandary that comes up now and then, and a lot of people don't realize this is a quandary. So if carbohydrates are found in all plant foods, but people want a low-carb, high-protein diet, but they also want it to be vegan, we've got a real pickle here because low-carbohydrate diets eliminate a lot of plant foods, considering that carbs are found only in plants. Or I shouldn't say only in plants as well as dairy foods. But if you eat plants, you have carbohydrates. Then you want high protein, which is in plant foods, but also meat. So if people are cutting out all animal foods, it's like there's nothing left to eat. It feels like it. It's really difficult to do this, but people just want to throw out these trending names, titles of diets, and don't realize they're in direct contradiction of each other, and it leaves not much to eat. All right, so we've covered low carb, high protein. How about low fat? Low fat was big in the 80s and 90s. Fat was the enemy. All fat was bad. Everything had to be fat-free. And here's the thing. Fat-free doesn't mean calorie-free. But low-fat or fat-free, we had fat-free Snackwell cookies. Snackwells was this whole product line of fat-free foods. Snackwell cookies, Snackwell crackers, all of these things. Some of us remember, we call it the Snackwell phenomenon because what happens is people were eating these low-fat foods or fat-free foods, also thinking that they were calorie-free, and of course they weren't. And when fat is removed, a lot of times sugar is replaced. So that's not the path to better health. So not just the low-fat or fat-free cookies, we had low-fat or reduced-fat peanut butter, which is still in existence, fat-free yogurt, margarine instead of butter, because the margarine was somehow healthier back then. It wasn't healthier. It was thought to be healthier. So this led to that pendulum swinging from low-fat because all these people were not losing weight. Turns out fat is good for us in the appropriate types and quantities. But this added sugar was led to people thinking all this sugar was what was causing weight gain, so then the low carb came in. Now, I will say this, no, a lot of sugar is not good, but that in and of itself is not what caused weight gain. It's eating too much food that does that. All right, and then plant-based diets. Now, vegetarian and vegan diets aren't new, but there's a couple things here. I've had people tell me, I'm eating 100% plant-based diet. I'm like, okay, are you saying you're vegan? Yes. So it's more of a newer name or a rebranding in some way of a vegetarian or vegan diet. So people are doing this more and more. And when I say plant-based, I encourage people to eat a lot of plants, not to the exclusion of animals, but we've got to talk semantics there. But people are looking at overall health, ethics, environmental concerns, and plant-based eating does have the benefits if it means more fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, beans. But even here, there's not a one-size-fits-all because even on plant-based diets, vegetarian or vegan, it can be high in highly processed foods that isn't all that balanced. There is plenty of vegan junk food, and Oreo cookies historically are vegan. Not that people who are eating plant-based are like, oh, I'm going for the Oreos, but it does fall into that category where somebody who's eating vegan still gets the Oreo cookies. Now, this one, I think I mentioned it last week because some of this is overlapping. I don't remember these next two, but intermittent fasting. So, of course, this isn't about what you eat as much as when you eat or the time frame in which you eat. So the idea here is cycling between periods of eating and not eating. And that could be 16 hours of fasting, an 8-hour window of eating. Some people see it as 8 hours of eating, but it's more of 8-hour window to eat. Or they can do alternate day fasting. So there's like a 5-2 approach where people eat regular, whatever that means, 5 days of the week, and then, quote, fast for 2 non-consecutive days, which in that definition of fasting is under 300-400 calories for those 2 days. Now, some people find this is helpful because of the structure. Others find it restrictive or impractical. When we're talking about time-restricted eating or that eating window, it's not really fasting. That's just going bouts between meals. Some is just longer than the other. So we don't really call it fasting because that's more of a longer period. But, people define things how they want. All right. And then detoxes and cleanses. Now, these have been marketed heavily. I was going to say the last 15 years, but if I think back, it's probably been longer than that because there's been these teas that people buy through different infomercials and things like that. But anyway, these things promise to, quote, reset the body, flush out toxins, jumpstart health. But one, I just tell people, if you have toxins in your diet, boy, you've really got a bigger problem than a detox is going to do. But we do have the liver, the kidneys, the lungs, which are our natural detox systems. And if those aren't working properly, what you're eating is not the biggest concern. And cleanses, boy, these usually leave people hungry, cranky, feeling like they failed when it's not sustainable, broke, because some of these are really expensive. And then I had somebody tell me her hair was thinning out. And I was like, well, because, yeah, you weren't getting enough protein. But people don't always make that connection. There's other kinds of diet trends in the past. There's been the caffeine pills. There's been different, they're amphetamines, but they were legal over-the-counter ones. Ephedra, that's not legal in the United States anymore. But even if we go back, this is not funny, but over 100 years ago, radium was promoted as a weight loss tincture, and the cost was pretty darn expensive. And yeah, people did lose weight because they were losing their teeth. Bones were deteriorating. They lost their jaws and they died. Of course, it seems ridiculous in 2025 to think that radium was what people were taking for weight loss. But what's popular right now is people injecting themselves with a medication that's accidentally found to promote weight loss. And if you're not paying attention, there's a lot of negative side effects that happen. People don't talk about those, but we've already got a class action lawsuit against the drug makers of these things now. So we'll see what people will think about that in 100 years. All right, so these diets look different on the surface. They tend to repeat the same patterns. Restrict something, promise quick results, and leave people wondering what they can and can't eat. So the big thing here is all the diets will work because when you cut out a significant amount of food, you're going to lose weight. Is it sustainable? Not usually. So doing gradual weight loss, if that's the goal, means you can meet your goal in not a shorter period of time, but it takes a little longer, but it's usually going to last because once you reach the goal, you don't need to have this drastic change. So I find when people have this highly restrictive diet, they meet their weight goal and then they go back to their old habits. Of course, the weight's going to come back on. So with this, the what they can and can't eat, what can I eat or not eat based on whatever diet someone happens to be following, brings me to this next part, food fear. So all that confusion leads us to this idea of food fear, and that's what happens when people believe certain foods will automatically cause harm or disease. So I hear this all the time. I'm always stunned when I still hear this, but here's some. These might sound familiar. Soda causes diabetes. Diet sodas are poison because of the artificial sweeteners. Red meat causes cancer. Carbs cause weight gain. Fruit and starchy vegetables have too much sugar. The latest, seed oils are toxic. And only organic foods are safe to eat, so I may as well go broke doing that. So all of these things that I just said, these are not true. Yet it's exhausting, especially for someone who knows better as a professional. It's not how diabetes and cancer don't just happen like that. So what food fear really means, here's the truth. No single food is going to cause or prevent a disease. Health outcomes like diabetes, heart disease, or cancer are the result of many things. Diet is part of it, but so are family history, age, lifestyle, environment, many things over time. So if someone has a soda now and then, it will not cause diabetes. If somebody has diabetes shortly after having a soda, that wasn't the cause. It just happened to correlate. Someone has red meat occasionally. It's not going to mean they're getting colon cancer. And really, it's the highly processed meats like the sausages and hot dogs and that sort of thing that are the ones that are higher risk of getting colon cancer. If someone enjoys a baked potato or a bowl of pasta, I had a bowl of pasta last night. It's not a one-way ticket to weight gain. It's just not. Nothing happened when I ate the pasta other than I was happy. What matters is what happens consistently over time. Eating patterns not individual foods, shape health outcomes. So sometimes the fear itself causes more harm than the food. When people believe they should never touch a certain food, and then they do, they end up with guilt, anxiety, or even disordered eating patterns. I had someone say something to me. Actually, she was in tears one time. This is going back to the diets. She was extremely upset because she had read the blood type diet, which is making a resurgence right now. And it has zero evidence. But she was in tears because she thought she had been eating wrong for her blood type for so long. She had caused her own disease. And it's just not how that works. It just isn't. And blood type does not determine what your diet should be. So here are some foods people think they should avoid. I've alluded to some of these, but let me clarify. Soda, artificial sweeteners, so that would be diet sodas or anything with artificial sweeteners in it. Red meat. I've had so many people tell me that when they had high cholesterol, they cut out red meat, but it's more of let's cut back on the fat, not necessarily the red meat. People think they should avoid carbs like bread and pasta or rice. Rice being a staple food around the world, but somehow in the United States, rice has got a problem, not anywhere else. Potatoes and corn, people think they need to avoid those. People think they need to avoid fruit because of all the sugar. I've even had people say, yeah, I don't eat carrots because of the sugar. And I'm like, oh yeah, the carrots. We're eating too many carrots. That's the big cause of all of or source of all of our sugar. People think they shouldn't eat dairy. That's personal preference. People have this idea they shouldn't eat seed oils. Wonder where that comes from. They are not problematic. And I did a podcast about omega-6s. I'll link in the show notes. They will think they need to avoid conventionally grown produce or foods that are not organic. And here's the thing. This is funny, but not. Weirdly, when I hear people demonizing these foods, the environment in which we're in, I observe that these individuals have zero problem with drinking beer, wine, or cocktails. And alcohol is a known carcinogen. It is known to cause cancer. It is known to cause cancer in humans. Yet people are worried about artificial sweeteners or red meat, but don't think the alcohol is doing anything, when in fact, alcohol is higher on the carcinogen list than red meat and artificial sweeteners. So with all this long list of things that people think they shouldn't eat or they have this food fear, it leaves people asking, well, what's left for me to eat? And here's the thing. The answer is plenty. None of these foods are inherently unsafe. Most of them can fit into a healthy eating pattern. And the one food that I tell people that is surely unsafe, don't eat it ever, is one that is gone moldy. If it's not, just moldy or it's too old. So if you've had some leftovers in the fridge for 10 days, that's the food that you should fear. Don't eat it. If you do, really stay close to home the next couple days. That's the type of food that people need to fear, okay? So not any food that we can buy over the counter that's not moldy, that's not past its prime. They're all safe. Just don't overdo it. That's the big thing. So don't be drinking canola oil. But I use canola oil and not worried about it. So what's the takeaway? Well, just like I talked about with last week's topic of superfoods and clean eating, food does not need labels. There are no bad foods. There's no good foods. There's great foods. There's better for you foods. But there's no reason to feel guilty for having a cheeseburger, a cookie, or a Coke. What matters is what you do most of the time, not what happens once in a while. Food fear and strict diet trends only make eating more stressful. So instead of chasing the next trend or avoiding a laundry list of these so-called bad foods, focused on balanced meals, variety, and consistency. And give yourself permission to enjoy food without guilt. Having that, even several days in a row, whatever that food that people tend to feel guilty about, is not going to do you in. And one last anecdote. I had a friend who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And that's, in most cases, it's not a good outcome. And he came by my office, this is where I worked at the university, and said his wife was upset because he had some Halloween candy. I was like, you know what? That's not going to be what kills you. It's not. So that was October. He died in February. It wasn't the candy that killed him. So with that, that's okay. Not saying you have to be on your deathbed to do this, but keep it in perspective. All right, way to end it here. So if you enjoyed the content, share this with someone who may also enjoy it or perhaps learn from it. Follow the podcast. Head over to the website. See what more content you consume. I've got links to a couple of blogs here that I mentioned with the food fear and the diet trends, and the one that I just mentioned that I forgot I was referring to. So I'll look back and listen to what I had said, what it was. See, this is what happens when I'm getting older. So, all right, everyone. With that, you have a great week. You take care, and bye for now.